This is a continuation of what the Republican Party and more broadly the conservative business-dominated ideology of the United States has been for 75 years. I mean, the important thing for people to understand is that something remarkable happened in the 1930s that has shaped our society ever since. The Great Depression from 1929 to 41 is the defining moment of the economic history of the United States. During that time, the working class of the United States went big time to the left politically. For those who live in the present and see that the working class is at best mixed in its attitudes towards the political system, there wasn't much disagreement in the 1930s that what we needed was something that would nowadays be called socialism of one kind or another. The president at the time, Roosevelt, didn't choose to use that term because it would have made what he was forced to do even more difficult. What he was forced to do was to recognize that the capitalist system wasn't working and that it needed major supports even just to be tolerable to the mass of the American people. And remember, in 1929, you were only 12 years after the Soviet Revolution in Russia, and people had that in their minds. They knew what people could and would do if and when a system was no longer tolerable. Now, just to remind folks, so what happened? They passed bills that Americans can't even imagine today. In the midst of a depression, when the government has no money, why not? Because millions of people are unemployed. And if you're unemployed, you don't earn an income. And if you don't earn an income, you don't pay an income tax. And if tens of thousands of businesses were bankrupt, which they were, they don't function and they don't pay taxes either. So the government had no money. It passed the Social Security system. For the first time in American history, if you're 65 years of age or older, the government is going to give you a check every month for the rest of your life. Wow, that's helping the average person big time. It means not just that elderly people have a decent retirement, but it means that their children don't have to scrimp and save to keep grandma and grandpa in a tolerable situation. No sooner was the ink dry on that bill than they passed the first minimum wage in this country. We had never had that before. No employer can pay less than a certain minimum because it's indecent to treat people that way. Then we had unemployment insurance. You lose your job through no fault of your own, which at that time meant tens of millions of Americans. We're going to give you a check every week for a year or two to help you through this difficulty. And then the biggest of all, the government became the employer of last resort. 15 million people who were unemployed, had no money, got a job working in something the government thought was important. Some of our earliest ecological efforts were made then. The WPA, we put art everywhere, theater and poetry everywhere. We did really wonderful things for the American people.
Yeah.
And here comes the best part. Who paid for all of this? The government couldn't. It didn't have any money. So Mr. Roosevelt, who had been approached by the communists and the socialists and the big union movement of that time, the CIO, he understood if he disappointed these people, he wouldn't be the president much longer. So he went to the rich and he said, you better give me the money to do all these things, because if you don't, we're going to have a revolution and you're not going to have any money to give anybody at all. And that scared them. Half of them, only half, went with the president. The other half became what we later understood to be the John Birch Society and the basics of what MAGA is today. They are the ones who didn't go along. But Mr. Roosevelt had enough of them, together with a unified working class, and all those bills were passed. Now, why do I say it's a defining moment? Because everything since 1945, when the war was over, when Roosevelt died, the business community was freaked out. So what happened afterwards, and of which Mr. Trump is just a part, is the undoing of everything that happened in the 1930s, which was called, by the way, the New Deal. Stop taxing corporations and the rich. Stop spending money to help the mass of people. That companies have been hesitant to do for fear of what it will do to the people. Mr. Trump is simply willing to go the next step And so he brings in Elon Musk to do that savaging of our federal employee force under the completely fake notion that this has anything to do with efficiency. It doesn't. And let me remind everyone, according to the United States Census, 3% of Americans are employers. The other 97% of us are not. But this is a program since 1945 designed and now imposed on us as the undoing of the New Deal. We had to have nearly a total collapse of America before we got Social Security, unemployment compensation, a federal jobs program. And we're not going to get those things back again unless and until two things are likely. One, a collapse of this system, and or a mobilization of people who understand what's going on and have said and will act on the notion, that's it, we're not taking this one step further. Every country now has a tariff against it or is being threatened by it. You know what that does? It gives every leader an out, a wonderful opportunity. Things are going bad in Nigeria or Malaysia or Panama or Poland. You can blame Mr. Trump, whoever you are. The tariff has really hurt. You get out of having being any way accountable. All Mr. Trump is doing is strengthening the position of every government in power because they can now plausibly blame Mr. Trump. So, and you know what that teaches the people of every country? That the United States is their enemy. This is not good. This may be great for Mr. Trump, MAGA, and American elections. But if you have even a little bit of understanding, the United States is now, and by the way, polls already show it, is considered the world's greatest threat to peace, is considered the most dangerous economy in the world, and is considered a rogue state because it's sort of out of control. The leader keeps threatening everybody, acting as if he can carry a big stick with no consequences. I can assure you, even the governments that you think of as allies of the United States, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Mexico, their number one priority now is to get out from under the threat of the United States. They're cutting deals with one another to that end because they don't want to be in a position where Mr. Trump can close the U.S. market to them or block them from buying something that America produces that they otherwise would buy and want. And if you think that's not going to hurt our economy, then you don't understand. We are more dependent on the world than we have ever been since we were a colony of Great Britain. To cut ourselves off now, whoa, way too late. If you brought the cars back to being produced in the United States, you would have to pay the tariffs on all those imported parts, or you'd have to develop the machinery to make them here. And then if you did all that, you'd have to pay American-level wages to the workers in the auto factories and the workers in all those parts factories. But that would raise the price of your automobile many, many dollars above what it is now. It means every American company that is competing with companies around the world would be disadvantaged because it would have to pay for cars and trucks a much higher price than their competitor in England or Italy or Nigeria or Brazil has to pay. And we already have that now. I'll give you an example. Here we are 15 years after that competition started. The number one success there is the Chinese, as is happening in every other area sooner or later. That's what it means to understand that the American empire is declining. A few weeks ago, I was in Europe, to be particular in Paris, France. And all over the streets, parked and moving around, were BYD automobiles. Why? Because they're the best, cheapest electric car on the market. Same thing with the truck. Every capitalist around the world who needs cars or trucks for their business as an input is buying BYD cars. Americans can't compete. Why? Because they can't get access to the BYD. And why is that? Mr. Trump, in his first presidency, imposed a 27.5% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. But now, to show you that this is not about Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden raised the tariff on BYD from 27.5% to 100%. Let me explain. You would have to come up here if you're an American with $30,000 that go to China to pay for the truck, and another $30,000, 100%, go to Uncle Sam because you're paying the tariff. For you, the truck would cost $60,000, so you don't buy it. You buy a lower quality electric vehicle from Ford or General Motors or Tesla, because that's the best you can do, but it puts you way behind your competitor around the world. So when we cut ourselves off, we are handing the competitors of the United States the ticket to defeat the Americans they compete with. And you know what that jeopardizes? U.S. jobs. So when Mr. Trump says, I'm protecting U.S. jobs, no, he's not. He's enacting a kind of ideological game. He's appealing to the people who don't understand. He only tells them the part that's the good news, not the bad news. And so he can mobilize the American people in what we will one day all remember as an act of consistent self-destruction. Good for Mr. Trump. Good for his election victory. Happy news for the MAGA faithful. But for the American economy, in whose name it's done, it's a disaster.